Hello, class. Today for reading, I wanted to look at something a little different. We're going to keep looking at poetry, but I wanted to connect our poetry to kind of what we're going to start talking about with social studies. And you're going to be given a social studies keynote assignment, uh, much like the one that was Google Slides, where we talk about the early American people. But this new one is about the Native Americans of Indiana. And this book here is called Dancing with the Indians. And it's not directly about any of the tribes here in Indiana, but these Native Americans, and they're called Indians here, and the politically correct term is Native Americans. But this book's a little older, and they call them Indians in it. But these Indians or Native Americans, I wanted you to see that they have a rich, beautiful history, and that, how are they important to this world? What do they do? How can we get an inside glimpse as to what they do? And this person, Angela Shelf Medeiros, she kind of tied everything together from what her family had told her, and I'm not sure if she's related or not. We'll find out. We'll look at the inside cover. It's been a while since I read it. And it's illustrated by Samuel Bird, and the illustrations are wonderful. One of the things I want you to take note of is that it's a Reading Rainbow book. And for those of you that don't know what Reading Rainbow is, it was a show, or is it? I mean, it's still a show. It's still around. It's a show hosted by a gentleman named LeVar Burton. He's famous to me because he played Geordi LaForge on Star Trek The Next Generation. He's the engineer on the Enterprise. But Reading Rainbow is great because it exposes kids to a tremendous amount of wonderful literature. And this is one of the books that was on the show. And it has just beautiful art and wonderful poems. It's one big book of poetry. It's a poem throughout, and it rhymes. So Dancing with the Indians by Angela Shelf Medeiros, illustrated by Samuel Bird. And as you can see here, this book would not have been possible without the cheerful assistance of my great uncle and aunt, Paul and Azilla Davis, who searched through 60 years of memories to answer my endless questions and supply me with material. Also, I'd like to thank my editor, Marjorie Kyler and John Briggs, both from Holiday House Inc. Finally, I'd like to offer a special thanks to my mother, Angeline Davis Shelf, for telling me about my great-grandfather, John Papa Davis, and his love for the Indians and their customs, as well as the Indians' love for them. Mama's packed our supper. The sheep are in their pens. It's time to go and visit the Seminole Indians. Golden threads of sunlight trickle through the trees, turning leaves above us into lacy canopies. We hear about our grandpa as our wagon creaks along, living with the Indians because slavery was wrong. He worked on a plantation before he ran away, traveling by night, hiding by day. Seminoles rescued Grandpa, making him their friend, calling him blood brother, black and Indian. Each year we go to visit, honoring those he knew, joining in the dancing, watching what they do. Our wagon nears the camp, drums pound and move our feet. Soon everyone is swaying to the tom-tom beat. The ribbon dances first, the women gather around, shells on wrist and ankles make a tinkling sound. Shimmering satin ribbons float from head to toe, shining human rainbows in the firelight's glow. Moccasins of dancers make gentle raindrop sounds. Satin ribbons spin around, around, around. The shadows dance in time to magic music too. They dip and bow and twirl as the dancers do. Soon the rainbow dance comes to a colorful end. Clapping and whistles are heard by women, children, men. The women and their shadows melt into the dark. Drummers strike a steady beat. The rattlesnake dancing starts. Dancers join their hands with every step they take. They twist and writhe and curl, the coils of a giant snake. The slithery animal glides into the smoky night. War dancers startle us, leaping into the light. Warriors' moccasin feet make rumbling, thundering sounds, wheeling, whooping, whirling, stomping on the ground. Fiercely painted dancers, shadows in the flames, reckless silhouettes, fearless and untamed. Warriors stamp and holler, an angry cavalcade. I draw away from them, a little bit afraid. They sing of ancient battles, gloriously fought and won, of shaggy buffalo and brave deeds they have done. When the pink of morning dawns, the warriors dance away. The drums make friendly sounds. Come dance with us, they say. Dance the Indian stomp dance. Join us one and all. We move into the circle, hearing the drummers call. Dancing with the Indians, we dip and stomp and sway. Dancing with the Indians until the break of day. Dancing with the Indians, we dance and dance all night. Dancing with the Indians in the firelight. Dancing with the Indians in the rosy light of dawn. Our morning chores are calling with the rising of the sun. Our dance is over now, but only for the night. Papa says we're coming back to dance by the firelight. And then it has a little after part about by Angela Shelf-Medeiros, the author. It says, my great-grandfather, John Davis, escaped from slavery around 1862. He traveled to Okehama, Oklahoma. Okla is an Indian word for people, and Hama is red, hence Oklahoma means red people. When it was still Indian territory, the Seminoles, who were forced to move to Oklahoma from Florida after the Seminole Indian Wars, accepted my great-grandfather as a member of their tribe. Papa John married a Seminole woman, and they had a son, Bunny. That marriage failed. My great-grandfather moved near Oklahoma City and married an African-American woman, Mary Ellen Hawkins, my great-grandmother, around 1909. Twice a year, Papa John, Mary Ellen, and their 9 children, Leo, Buzzy, my grandfather, Mary, Ethel, Willie, Adern, Irene, Paul, Freeman, and Orita traveled to Okehama, for the week-long Indian powwow. Papa John joined in the Indians' religious purification ceremonies and dances. Mary Ellen brought her wonderful fried chicken and helped the Indian women prepare the evening feast. The children played Indian games. After Papa John died, my grandfather, Leo, took my mother, Angeline, and my Uncle John to the powwow. Almost 100 years later, many of the Oklahoma relatives still join in the Indian powwows, and they still do the stomp dance. The text for Dancing of the Indians was inspired by my ancestors' experience. So, that's a picture book written in the format of a poem. Now for the next part of this lesson, we're going to stop and we're going to look at some of the elements of it and do our best to identify those according to what we've been taught the last few days. Okay, class. By now you should have watched the first part of this video, which was me reading the excellent, let me get it, hold it up here, excellent book, picture book, Dancing with the Indians. Some great stuff, wonderful book. And what I like most about it is that it's a picture book where the story is told through pictures and poem. It's verse, there's a stanza on every page. And one thing I truly love is the imagery of this book and the words that the author chooses to use. You know, we've been talking about this for a few days now, and please remember, one of these is called a line. Mama's packed our supper. The sheep are in the pens. It's time to go and visit the Seminole Indians. Okay? That's a line, 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 line. Those all together form a, what's that word? A stanza, right? Remember, stanza is the same thing as a paragraph in a book. Except we can see how it's different than a paragraph because it's 4 lines just go boop, and it kind of cuts down. Whereas a sentence would be on a full page, right? So we have a stanza. And we have lines. Now, not a whole lot of repetition in this book. And there's not always going to be repetition in a poem. But there is one interesting aspect I wanted to talk about as it relates to yesterday's lesson. And that's the lesson of rhyme scheme. If we look at this, and we look at the rhyme scheme, it's interesting because the words we used yesterday were fairly obvious in the way they rhymed, right? There was, words like jumping and bumping. Or was the umping and the jumping? Or umpings were the end rhyme, but the first letters were different. Or cat and hat, mice and nice. Things like that were kind of different. But it wasn't a huge, huge difference. But rhyming words aren't always going to be quite so obvious. And it's all in, and this goes back to beginning of the year where we talked about the 6 traits of writing, where we talk about word choice. And there are words you can choose that have the same end rhyme sound that just, for some reason, they just work, and it's interesting. Now, I'm gonna write, put the I'm gonna write the rhyme scheme of this stanza down. And we're gonna take a look at it. So, Mama's packed our supper. Remember, it's the first line of the poem that we're seeing. So that's gonna be A. The sheep are in their pens. Well, that's B. I mean, that's, pens and supper are different, so different rhyme scheme. It's time to go and visit. Ooh, that's not like the others, so that's A, B, C. The Seminole Indians. The sheep are in their pens, the Seminole Indians. I'm gonna give that an A. Because it has the same NS end rhyme sound. But do you notice how they're kind of different words? But they still have that rhyme. The sheep are in their pens, the Seminole Indians. It's not a perfect rhyme, but it has that same end sound. That same NS, and it sounds like a rhyme. Pens, Indians. When you read it with the rhythm, Mama's packed our supper. The sheep are in their pens. It's time to go and visit the Seminole Indians. It just has that same sound. It's so interesting to me when it works out like that. So remember, guys, the big things that we're taking away from this week with poetry are how there's lines, there's a stanza, which is a group of lines, the rhyme, and the repetition. I'm going to move on to, where's my pen? The next, there it is. Oops. Oh, I gotta move this. One of the great things about this book, the artwork, like I said, and just the way you can look at it and go, whoa, that's beautiful. What are they doing? And it says the ribbon dances first. The women gather around. Shells on wrist and ankles make a tinkling sound. Remember, line, 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 line. All form together to make a stanza. And let's do the rhyme scheme while we're at it. The ribbon dances first. Okay, that's A. It's the first line of that stanza. Ribbon dances first. The women gather around. Well, that doesn't have the same rhyme scheme. Shells on wrists and ankles. No, that's not the same as ankles is not like around or first. Make a tinkling sound. Which of those other three does sound like? Does it sound like A first, B around, or C ankles? Yeah, B around, right? Or yeah, it's like B around. So sound and around have that same end rhyme. So the rhyme scheme for this is A, B, C, B. A, B, C, B. And one of the other interesting things about poetry is the imagery that comes along with it. The words, and this goes back to word choice again. Because look, the author is using this word tinkling. And what does that mean when it's making a tinkling sound? Shells on wrists and ankles make a tinkling sound. Well, think of, have you ever heard of, seen a shell necklace or heard a shell bracelet or something? Shells on wrists and ankles make a tinkling sound. I can just picture that sound in my head. I like that use of that word tinkling. And that's one thing that poets do very well, is the good poets have just an exceptional vocabulary where they use this imagery and these words that bring to mind, like they bring these mind images to life, these mind movies where you read it and go, wow, I can see that. I love it. It's fascinating stuff. Okay, guys, so you need to check what you need to do to complete this activity, and if you need help, please email me. All right?